Hello and welcome to this new tutorial, and in this tutorial we will see one of most prominent feature detector, and that is Harris corner detector. So how we can use it in Emgu CV. So let's get started. I already configured this project to use Emgu CV. You can check one of my previous videos how to configure Emgu CV with Windows Forms application. So inside this feature 2D, I'm just going to add a menu item, and I just call it feature detection or detectors, and inside it I'm just going to write Harris detector. So double click on this, and inside it I'm going to write the code for Harris corner detection. So the first thing I'm going to do is to make sure that if I have an exception my program doesn't crash. So I use try catch, and inside it I can display my error message. And to apply the Harris corner detector, I just want an image to be in my data store. So I have already created a list for that, or dictionary for that. So I'm just going to make sure that it is available there. If image list of I put the value of this key to be input. So if equals null, so we are not going to do anything. So just I'm writing a return. You can write a message here. So let me read this image from image list into a variable img. So img list, and I'm just going to read the image at this index into img variable. And the next thing, that instead of this one I need to clone it because I don't want to change the original one. And the next thing, since for processing I need it in the grayscale, so I need to convert it into a grayscale image, and I can say img gray is equal to img.convert, and I am converting into a gray, and the depth should be the same. So that's how we convert it into a grayscale image. And to apply the Harris corner and to store the output, we need a variable. I just call it corners is equal to new mate object, so that we will store the information of the corners in it. And now we can apply CV invokes corner Harris to obtain the Harris corners. And this one is expecting an input image, and it is requiring an object to put the corner somewhere. So I have already created it. This is the block size, that what should be how much neighborhood should we consider while calculating the Harris corners. So I am putting 2 as its neighbors. And this aperture size is basically calculating the edges, so it is using the Sobel operator. For example, I am 3. The K is the Harris detector free parameter. So if you look at the Harris corners method, in this formula you will see that this is the formula that is Harris is using, and this K is what we mean by the free parameter, and that is what the value for this free parameter is 0.04. So this is you can play around with these parameters, and these are the most important parameters, and these default values are working fine. So I'm just selecting them as it is. So once we obtain the corners, since we use the Sobel operator also, some of the values may be negative, and so we can normalize them between 0 and 255. So I'm using cvinvoke.normalize method, and here we are using the corners that I'm going to normalize, and output also the corners that I want to normalize, and the max that I'm giving is 255 and min is 0, and I want to use a norm type dot minimax normalization. So this will essentially normalize between 0 and 255. Now what I want to do is I want to go through all the pixels in the corner and display only the most important corners or important features that I want. So essentially I will define a threshold value, so I just call it threshold. So let's say I'm interested in the threshold values which are greater than 255, so I'm going to apply a for loop through the rows, corners dot rows, and also a loop for corners dot columns. And essentially I want to select only the threshold values which are greater than this threshold. And one thing that I would do is, it is difficult to access the pixel values in the corner, so maybe I can use a matrix. So I need to convert it into a matrix, so I can do something like this, matrix of some float numbers, or maybe, okay, just keep it a float or byte. So matrix, I call it matrix is equal to new matrix. Instead of bytes, I'm just keeping the okay, bytes, and it's corners dot rows times corners dot height, and it's okay. And now we can copy those corners into this matrix. So copy to matrix. So essentially we copied all the values in the corner into my matrix. Now I can apply the threshold on this matrix, or I can apply the threshold and then we can display the values. So now I can apply the threshold on these values. So I'm just going to write a condition. So matrix of I comma j. If this value is greater than my predefined threshold, then I want to draw a circle around it. CV invoke dot circle, and this circle is expecting an image, so I just put the image, and the center, or the point where we want to draw it, it will be between j and I, since you know the corners of the image start at the left top, and I'm drawing it on my window form. So j will be first and I should be second, remember that. And let's say the radius is 5, and the color, let me select the red color, BGR 00, and R is 255, and let's say the thickness is 1 itself. So once I draw a circle around the corner or the interest point, I can now show it, draw it, and then I can show it in my picture box. So image is equal to img.isBitmap. So I hope this one will work. Let us run and see the results. So let me an image, and let's say this building, and feature detector, hardest feature detector, index is out of range. So let me see where the index is out of range. So this one should be rows, and this should be the columns. Height also means the same. So, and also maybe since I just copied all the values into the matrix, essentially the rows and height of the corners in the matrix should be same, but since I am running it on matrix, so I should say here it's matrix.columns. And also I will make sure that when we byte, say byte might be the values might cause problem for me. So let us keep it as a float to make sure that those are not clipped off. Okay, so let us run again and see if we can detect the corners. So open an image, building image, and now I'm going to say hardest detector. So here I can see 1, 2, 3, 4 corners with this threshold value. So maybe, and there are also other corners I can see here, and maybe I can increase the visibility by increasing the thickness to 3, and maybe I can reduce it. Let's say if I change the threshold value to 160, Then let us see. I select it and hardest detector. So you can see if we change the threshold value, these are important features above that threshold value which we can display here. But as you can see that I have the user interface, but to change this threshold value, I don't know which threshold value will give me better results. So it's not a good practice to always go and change the code. So maybe I can add basically a user interface through which we can change the threshold value and see which one is giving me best value. So let me make a little change into my coding. So instead of fixing it like this, maybe I can just create a new method. So I just cut it, and sorry, I think I cut some part of. Maybe I can take all this, create a new method, I call it, or private void apply hardest corner, and inside this hardest corner I paste the code that I have, and instead of defining this threshold value here, I can create an integer threshold, and the default is going to be 200. So if I call it with some value or not doesn't matter, but the default value will be 200. And what I need to do is let me create this exception, and I can say message box dot exception dot message, and instead of throwing an exception, instead of doing this, we can throw an exception here, exception object, so ex message, so that it will throw an error and we are catching it right here. So the first thing that I want to do is I can call this hardest. We can call it like this also, because ultimately it will set the parameter. But what I want is I want some user interface through which I can change the value of the threshold and see how it works. And to do that, let me create a new form. $255. So I can change this hardest parameter, and I'm saying min value and integer max value that I just want to display, and also the current value that I just want to show. So essentially I will create some local variables within this class, integer min, max, and current, and I can initialize with these values. My min is equal to min, and max is equal to max, and current is equal to current value. And what I want to do is I want to expose a method so that I will run this method. I should be able to run this method from within this form, hardest form parameter. To do that, I can expose it using some events and a delegate. So I can easily create a public delegate, and I just can say that what is the signature of this method is, since I'm going to call this one, so the signature of this method is void apply hardest, and then it is taking some parameters. So I say void my delegate hardest, I call it, and it is taking an integer x as parameter. And now I am going to define an event. So based on this event event, and based on this delegate hardest, and I am calling it on apply. For example, I just want to apply. So what essentially I want to do is, okay, I write it in the wrong place, so these should be inside it, so that's why they were creating the problem. So I'm just creating these delegates inside this class. So what I will essentially do is I just created a delegate which basically matches this signature, and then an event. I just want to register to the event, and from this form, whenever I click the apply button, I want to call this method. So this is what I want to do. So when we click on this apply, what I want to do is, if my on apply is not equal to null, dot invoke, I just want to call it, and this one is taking an integer value, so that value will be coming from my trackbar dot value, so the current value of my trackbar that I'm going to select. And also whenever I change the trackbar, I want to update the value in the current text label. LBL current dot text is equal to trackbar dot value dot to string, and in the load event I want to initialize these values for my trackbar also. So I double click in the form somewhere here, and trackbar is label current dot text is equal to current dot to string, and lbl min dot text is equal to min dot to string. So the values which I have passed, lbl max dot text is equal to max dot to string. And also when I'm initializing the trackbar dot value is equal to current, whatever the current value that I have. Okay, so that's it. The most important is I'm just calling the method, this method with the new value of my trackbar, and we can immediately see the results. And just before after calling this apply hardest corner, I want to show my form also. So what I can do is form hardest parameters is equal to new form hardest, and the default minimum value will be 0, max value will be till 255, and the current value is 200. And the parameters, remember that dot on apply plus equals to, I am interested in one method, so which method I'm just going to show is apply hardest. What it means is that whenever I also need to call this method from the other form, so I can show that form dot show dialog. And one thing that I forgot is before setting the value of the trackbar, we need to set the minimum value and the maximum value, which we have received from the previous window. Dot max is equal to max value, and now the current value that we have set. So let us run it and see the results and the changes. File, open it, and let me open the same building, and now I'm going to harass detector. So now this is what I wanted, and now between 0 and 255 I can change the threshold values, and you can see that these are some of the features that have been detected on this threshold value. If I change it to, let's say, 185 and apply, as I reduce it, the more important corners that I am considering or the algorithm is considering, and it is displaying. So I think it is too much, so it is now you can see that when I reached some threshold values less than that, most of the values had the same, so it is basically drawing the circles, and it looks like that all are very important. So this is how the Harris corner detector works, and I hope this video is useful for you.